It's a bountiful day in this hollow earth. A beautiful day for a hybrid. Do they shift shape? Boy, I feel great. Even though I'm still fighting off this flu that is making me feel terrible. Won't you be my cousin? Oh, shit. Welcome back, y'all, to the most important meal of the day. Shrimp for breakfast. We got the strong black cup of coffee right here. We got the Dayquil going. We got some gummies from Cycling Frog for breakfast. This is like take 3 of the video, so I've already had some gummies. I'm not going to keep eating them. Then I definitely won't get through it. Oh my gosh, guys. I'm feeling pretty crummy. Still. Better overall. Sleeping better. Got a couple good night's sleeps, but my head is just fucking bleh. I can't think. Not much of an appetite. Just still feel very sore throat. This all started Friday? Fuck, it's Wednesday now? Good God. Got a tiny bit of work done yesterday, a little bit of drawing, felt really wonky working on the puzzle. Got to start this poster now for Of the Trees, the second part of the diptych, which is going to be absolutely insane for this Red Rock show coming up in November that we might end up being at. We'll see. We're talking about maybe coming out for the show. That'll be pretty insane and sick. And Red Rocks, they had a UFO sighting there recently after one of the shows. The staff saw a UFO come down. Oh, you know I'm gonna have to talk to some people about that up there. Maybe try to summon one. Maybe I'll go out and try to get the crowd to summon a UFO with me up at Red Rocks. That would be absolutely insane. Oh my God. Holy cow. Let's see. Yesterday I had a awesome meeting with my new friends at Cycling Frog. I reached out to them because I love their product and their website and their mission. And had a really cool chat with them, and we are gonna cook up some fun collaborative stuff. Sounds like I'll probably end up doing some work for them on some future campaigns. But they sent me that wonderful birthday package, which you saw in yesterday's Shrimp for Breakfast video, and we'll definitely hit some little thank you video for them on the Instagram soon once I'm feeling a little better, once I'm fucking back to 100%. I feel like right now I'm probably about 75%, but like the 25% that's missing is all mental. I'm feeling like pretty good physically now. Headache gone, body ache gone, which was absolutely debilitating for the first couple days. Like the worst headache, like a belt around my head being cranked, and then like every bone in my body fucking aching. That was not fun. Out of like absolutely nowhere, like went to bed and then woke up in the night feeling like that. And then, now I'm just a fucking sick old rooster. Sick old rooster trying to cluck it out in this glong, 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 glang, glong, glong. That's what it's like in my head. I start to form thoughts, and then they just disappear. It's funny because you feel like you can draw. Like I start drawing, and then I realize there's just no connection. It's like you're changing the channels on the TV, and there's just nothing coming through. Like, you know, I might try to do a little bit of coloring work today. You know, try to figure out some way to be productive. Maybe I could start to lay out this new poster. Probably not though, because that's like, that's the kind of work that I really need all fucking shrimps on deck for. You know what I'm saying? Oh my God, how are we gonna get through a half-hour video today, guys? What the fuck? Oh my God, I almost gave up. This is my third try, and I was like, dude, there's no way I'm gonna do this, but I gotta do it. I gotta do it, y'all. So let's see. Tomorrow, guys, girls, everyone in between, everybody on every spectrum. We've been watching Autism on the, or no, what is it called? Love on the Spectrum. And it really makes you realize, number one, like everybody is on a spectrum because all of them remind me of people that I know that are and aren't autistically, labeled. And, my dad worked with people with special needs his whole career. That was his career. So I grew up around a ton of special needs people. In the 80s, no less, and in the 90s, when, everybody was just retarded. That was one of the biggest words in culture and movies and everything. And we weren't allowed to say it growing up. Like, my dad was like, you can't say retarded. Because, he worked in the field and it was offensive and is offensive, of course. But it's such a funny word, and so we were, of course, even more obsessed with saying it because we couldn't say it, growing up in our house, so we just said it all the time. Along with butt lick. If I called my brother a butt lick, I would get spanked, and so we were always, whenever my parents weren't around, me and my brother were like, butt lick, butt lick, butt lick. We'd be like... Totally mad. Like, you can't make a rule for a kid. It will just make them want to do it more. It's almost like, yeah, just say it. If you want to say it, just go ahead and say it. Oh my God, kids are totally mental. What are we talking about? What are we even talking about, guys? Oh my God. Yeah, I don't even know what the hell we're talking about. Oh, autism on spectrum. I feel like now when I watch myself talk, I feel like I have autism on the, now I feel like I sound like I have it when I'm watching my videos. The Love on the Spectrum. And everybody, I'm like, oh, this guy's got autism. This guy's got autism. But the show's cool because it really allows you to see that, people have stereotypes about people with special needs, and maybe they think they're all the same, like any stereotype. That's the base stereotype, is they're all the same. But they're all just a wildly different, crazy, cool people. Again, the thing I love the most about a lot of special needs people that I grew up around, super freaking high morale all the time. They are my people in that way. And in my heart, I'm a special needs individual. And yeah. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Betty and Barney Hill. We're here today. We are here today, y'all, to talk about Betty and Barney Hill, right? Tomorrow is the anniversary of their trip through Franconia Notch and their interaction with some other entities, right? Now, for y'all who don't know, we should do a rough overview of the story. I don't know if even today's the day to do it. Tomorrow is the day. But I feel like we should prep y'all a little bit. So, we'll start out. Earlier in the day, a radar base in Vermont, early in September 19th, 1961. There's a radar base in Vermont that we've been to. I forget exactly where it is, like an hour from here. Now it's decommissioned. Now it's abandoned. But you can go through the buildings and it's super crazy and cool. And there is a government report, a report from that radar base that I forget at some point in the morning, I forget exactly what time, a UFO appears and hovers over that base for 18 minutes. Everybody at that base comes out and sees it. A report is filed. It's in the Project Blue Book files, right? Which was the reporting mechanism at the time for, to let the government know about UFOs. Unfortunately, Project Blue Book's real mission was to debunk everything and then secretly gather all the data and gather whatever physical objects and biological objects they could and then, pass them along. So earlier in the day, bang, we see a UFO over here in Vermont. Disappears. That night, Betty and Barney Hill are driving back from Niagara Falls in Canada, and they're driving back to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and they're driving through Franconia Notch. And it is very quiet there. It is even less populated than it is now. if anybody's ever been there, one of the reasons I'm so connected to this story is I love Franconia Notch. I grew up, hiking and hanging out there, and we go camping there, and it's one of my absolute favorite spots. The Flume Gorge and the Lost River Gorge outside of the Notch are both just super fond memories of my childhood. These walkways going over these waterfalls down in this gorge, just like absolutely unbelievable nature. I'm a forest guy, and the hike up to Lonesome Lake and the Lonesome Lake hut up there. These are all super nostalgic things, and hiking the mountains there, Cannon Mountain and Lafayette Mountain and all that stuff. The little platform there. It's such a fun area. There's so much to do. You can go, now it's just they have this amazing campground there. They have a bike path that you can bike through the whole park. They have the basin there. They have all these great attractions. So much super accessible hiking. Really, you could really go there and keep it light and fun, and even with young kids, and have a good time. But Betty and Barney Hill are driving through late at night, and Betty sees some funny star moving around and starts to talk to Barney about it. And Barney is a little bit annoyed, right? As married couples are. It's late. They're driving home. She starts going like, man, this is crazy. You got to look at this. This is like a UFO or something, Barney. And Barney's like, he's just like, Betty, it's not a UFO, and he doesn't really want to think about it. He wants to get home. He wants to go to bed. He wants to not get in any encounters, right? This is also an interracial couple in 1961 driving through rural New Hampshire, right? They live in suburban New Hampshire, Portsmouth, where I also had an apartment for a short amount of time. Nice little city. They're part of the Unitarian Church there. But there is a lot of racial tension and racial friction, back then even more so, right? There's still segregation going on in places, and so Barney's very aware of that. Betty's somewhat aware of it. And they're driving through, and Barney knows about planes, and he's like, well, let's see what this is, right? They're driving around, and as they're going over Cannon Mountain, they see this craft go over the mountain and disappear. And as they come around where the old man in the mountain used to be, the UFO comes around the face of the man in the mountain, which is such a great visual. And they pull over, and Barney gets his binoculars out, and he's looking, and he's like, what the hell is this thing? This has got to be some kind of like little plane or whatever. He's thinking, is this the military? They shouldn't be doing this, right? He's thinking all sorts of those things you think. And as he's looking, he sees this silver cigar or tic-tac shaped craft with all these windows in it, and he sees figures there moving around. And as he looks closer in the binoculars, he can see a guy looking over his shoulder at him like this and smiling at him. And he can hear the guy's voice in his head. And he's going, "Don't look away. Don't look away. Keep looking at us, Barney. Keep looking at us." And just then, a fucking ladder starts to come down from the UFO, right? So Barney's bugging. He's looking, and you can hear the tapes of this. They go to a military hypnotist to help with the PTSD after the fact. And you can hear the terror in his voice as he's reliving this. He can't remove the binoculars from his face, and he's screaming in his mind. He's saying, "God, please give me the strength to move my hands, to move these binoculars and get out of here. They're going to capture us. They're going to capture us." And finally, with all his will and strength, he tears the binoculars from his face so hard that he rips the strap. He runs back to the car. He goes, "Betty, get in the car. They're going to capture us." Betty was out with the dog, going to the bathroom. Jumps in the car, heads down the road. The craft comes over the car, blocks out the sky. Strange noises and sensations are heard and felt by Betty and Barney Hill. And then the next thing they remember is a few hours later, and they're 10 or 20 miles down the road. And they're very confused and groggy, and they're tired, and they're driving, and they get home, and they are very confused because it's hours later. They've missing time, a couple of missing hours. And Barney's shoes are scuffed up. Betty's dress is torn. There's like some kind of powdery stuff on Betty's dress. There are weird, like, disc symbol, like little weird reflective kind of stuff that's happened to the surface of the metal on the car. It's left these weird kind of shiny rings over the car. And they report to Pease Air Force Base in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, that they saw this craft. They report it the next day, and they I can't remember if they physically meet with somebody there or just fill out a report. But that night, independently of Betty and Barney Hill, Pease gets hits on the radar for activity around the time and location of Betty and Barney Hill's incident, and they scramble jets to go check it out. And this is another, so there's 3 reports filed with the military about this event. There is the radar base in Vermont, there is scrambling the jets that night, and then there is the next morning Betty and Barney Hill reporting what they remembered seeing, which is the craft, and they fled, and they are just really perplexed about what happened. They're very confused, they're very uncomfortable. Betty's having nightmares. Barney is incredibly anxious, and they talk to some friends about it, some family about it. I think at this point, her niece, Kathleen Marden, overhears her mother, Betty's sister, talking with Betty about it, like that night or the next morning. And she has written a book about this, and she's become part of the landscape of like UFO lore. And over time, Barney develops this ring of warts around his junk. They have all these weird They know something more happened and they don't know what it was. And if people are into UFO lore, you'll be very familiar with the idea that the certain types of encounters with certain types of entities, they seem to wipe your mind clean like Men in Black style, where your memories get repressed. And your brain probably does this a lot on its own too, and they reinforce it, right? Because you are experiencing something that you don't understand, you're experiencing something that is traumatic, and your brain puts it away, right? This happens in everyday, quote unquote, normal, natural things where, you know, something happens that's so traumatic to somebody that, you know, some kind of assault, that they lock it up and put it away, you know, and their brain doesn't allow them to process it on a conscious level because maybe it'll break their brain. Maybe it's too big for them to think about. And so over time, Betty and Barney Hill seek the help of therapist, and then this therapist connects them to this hypnotherapist, this guy, I forget his name. John Fuller is the name of the guy who wrote the Interrupted Journey book, and can't remember the name of the hypnotist, but he's a military hypnotist. He helps soldiers that have intense PTSD from combat, try to dissolve that PTSD, try to, go back to those moments in hypnotism and, kind of unpack them and diffuse them, so to speak, and allow them to, allow the trauma to be released, through different therapy sessions. And so this isn't, a hokey magician that they're going to see. And don't forget that, Barney saw the people in the craft and remembers it before anything else happened, right? And that's something that people tend to forget with this, because there's a certain element of the hypnosis, memories. And some people don't like the idea of memories under hypnosis and stuff, which is fine. It's not even really about whether the story is true or not. It's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating folktale. There's stuff to be learned from it. The fact that this story exists is insane, and there are clues in here. But if you want to think about reality and did it happen, I think the multiple Blue Book reports are what makes this a fascinating case of there is a lot of physical evidence from different vectors that something supernatural went on here. Ultranatural. And in the hypnosis, it is separately, and Betty and Barney aren't remembering what they're saying, right? He's prompting them to, go back to these moments and walk them through it, relive it, walk them through these moments to try to figure out what's gone on here, what's the trauma. He knows these people are deeply traumatized by something. He's trying to figure out what it is. And he does them in separate sessions, and they don't remember what they've said in the session afterwards, right? So it won't trouble them, right? And you can pull up some of these on YouTube if you can find them. There's about, I think, 20 to 30 minutes of both of their tapes, and it's incredibly spooky. They are reliving the event. I suggest you go and listen to it, because that is really compelling. And the book, The Interrupted Journey, is largely the transcripts of the hypnosis, but to hear them actually there reliving it is the most blood-curdling thing. Like, it's a direct piece of evidence. It really brings you into that moment. So Betty and Barney Hill are continuing to drive down the road, and they are stopped by a giant, what they think of as the sun in the road, this giant light on the road. The sun is on the road. They stop. There is about 8, what they see as policemen stopping them. Barney's wondering if they're getting robbed. They are compelled to pull off this side road south of the notch in Kathleen Martin's book, you can actually figure out where the actual abduction site was. I haven't been there yet. They are brought out of the car. Two people bring two creatures on either side of them. They look sort of human, sort of not. They have jumpsuit-ish things on. They are appearing to them as sort of police officers at this point. They are both under some kind of mind influence. Barney is completely out. They're dragging him like this, right? So the tops of his shoes are being scraped through the woods to the craft. Betty is being brought along, and on the way she kind of wakes up a little bit and is kind of arguing with them, like, what are you doing with me? Let me go, kind of starting to give them attitude. And Barney's brought in one room, she's brought in another, and they're given the kind of like classic physical, the alien physical. Betty gets a needle in her stomach, which is very painful, and then she cries out, and they kind of touch her head, and the pain goes away. Barney has some really vague memories of coming to in there and kind of peeking and seeing where he is, and then being very scared and shutting his eyes and not looking again. And Betty, she has her little exam, but she's more cognizant through it. She's kind of talking to them through it, and then she wraps up first, and then she kind of starts to chit-chat with them, and she kind of gets folksy with them. She, in this classic New England old maid style, she just is starting to, chew it up with them, and they're talking about, she's asking them where they're from. He kind of pulls down a star map, and this the leader guy, and he's talking to her, and he's like, well, can you tell me where you are in here? And she's like, no. And he's kind of roasts her. He's kind of like, well, if you don't even know where you are on this map, how am I supposed to tell you where we're from? And which is just kind of funny. He kind of cooks her. And she's like, you got to give me some evidence. You got to give me some evidence, that this has happened. And he's like, well, what do you want? And she's looking around, and there's like some kind of book that she takes. And she's like, can I keep this book? And she's looking through it, and there's kind of some information in there. And he's like, well, yeah, you can have it. And then the other guys are like, dude, what are you talking about? She can't have that book. And they're like, get it back from her. So he has to take it back from her. And then Betty's real upset by it. They, I think, are talking about vegetables. She's talking about what they eat. At one point, the people that are the creatures that are inspecting Barney come out, and they're very surprised to find that he has dentures, because in an army training thing, Barney's teeth got blown up with a grenade round. He was in the service for a time, and he has dentures, and they don't understand that. I guess they don't understand aging, which is weird. But it's just, the story has a lot of different phases, and then they're kind of released, and they kind of have a cordial goodbye, and then they kind of get going on their way, and Betty says, I'm going to remember this. He says, you're not going to remember this. And he says, even if you remember it, you're going to remember different things. It's not going to make any sense. No one's going to believe you. So, save yourself the grief and don't bother. And then, so they're sent on their way. This is kind of a short overview version. And then they, like we said, they recover these memories, and they've talked to a few people about it, but very few people over the course of a couple of years. They end up talking to a group of people at their church about it at a certain point, after talking to their pastor about it, the Unitarian Church in Portsmouth, which is, as religion goes, I think it's the absolutely most open-minded, kind of accepting. I think they basically accept anything. And they're very open-minded. They were very progressive at that time, right? Where, integration and stuff like that too. And Betty and Barney Hill, very active in their community, very active in the civil rights movement of the time. I think Barney is a member of the NAACP, and they're doing a lot of, they're very, prominent members of the community. They don't really want to talk about this with people. Barney is incredibly embarrassed about it, doesn't know what the hell to think about it. Barney is. Betty is, Betty is much more. She has this very idealistic view of it, this very amazing view of it. It was also traumatic to her, but their experiences of it are very different. And actually, the book that I'm listening to right now, I think it's called The Abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, really goes into the different psychology of each of them, and looking at how they both view the event differently and stuff, which is also very fascinating. There's so many facets to this story. It's not the most like compelling if you're trying to like give someone a UFO story that they can sink their teeth into and maybe walk away thinking, going from a skeptic to someone that's more open-minded about it. This probably isn't the one, because there's so many twists and turns, and there's so many places where you can kind of point and go like, well, that doesn't make sense, or this doesn't make sense. Over this course of time, Betty's having like recurring dreams about it, and some people think she just kind of cooked it all up in her dreams. But the different reports that were filed, the fact that Barney clearly sees the craft and sees the people inside it before, that's not a recovered memory. So that stuff. And then also, if you combine this with the anecdotal evidence, right? Anecdotal evidence to me is some of the strongest evidence out there, especially for phenomena that is beyond our ability to understand. The anecdotal evidence with other scenarios that are like this, other like the classic like physical craft, humanoid creatures giving you that they're somewhat relatable to humans, that are giving you a medical exam. This is what I would think of as like the future human category, the humanoid category of ET, UFO encounters. Because they're so much like us. Like either they're just appearing like us for our own benefit or for their own psyop, and they're completely different than that, or they are somehow like related to us, like an offshoot of us, future version of us, past version of us, some kind of version, alternate parallel version of us, right? The fact, if they look that much like us, then they're probably related to us, or it's a psyop. But in that genre, there's a lot of like, this matches up, with the recovered the stuff where you're not gonna remember it, you're gonna have a glimpse of it, and then over time you're gonna be overwhelmed with your brain trying to release the information, this crazy traumatic information. Like Barney became a crazy alcoholic during this time. Betty had all these crazy nightmares. They had a lot of real problems from this, and when the therapists saw it and knew, they're like, man, this story is too hard to believe, but these people have gone through something traumatic, and, bringing them to the hypnotherapist and, the military hypnotherapist, and him understanding the whole time. They have a hard time understanding what Betty and Barney Hill are talking about, but what they see is 100% real. They're like, these people went through something, and whatever they think it, that's really what they think happened, right? So that is the gist of the story. And then, they don't talk about it. Eventually, this reporter from this magazine called the Boston Traveler gets wind of the story, I think, through kind of it coming out through the church and through people talking and stuff like that. That person goes ahead and writes a story about it against Betty and Barney Hill's wishes. And then after that, they come out and they engage in their own version of the story, and releasing a book. And James Earl Jones stars as Barney Hill in a early version of, like, an old-fashioned version of this story. This movie is pretty corny, but it's the 70s or something like that. But and so this story, their abduction story is considered the first widely reported modern American UFO story. So I don't know how good of a job I just did of telling it, because my brain's so whacked out. I think I did a better job than I actually thought I would today. But that's a little overview. There's a lot of really corny content about it out there, but there's also some good stuff. Tomorrow I will bring some. I will do some links and give you some info about the good stuff. I'll be a little bit more prepared. Hopefully, I'll be a little bit more in my headspace, in my normal headspace, and not so clogged up and shit. But there you go, a little shrimp for breakfast, that's the overview of the story. It's such a crazy story, and it's crazy because it happened in a place where I grew up and love, and then it's crazy because it's such a wild story. It was a very significant, it was a national news story at the time and kicked off this whole string of UFO mania that came after that, and they really became sort of celebrities of it. And then I also lived I had an apartment in Portsmouth when Betty was still alive. Like, I probably crossed paths with her and didn't even know it. I was sort of vaguely aware of this story, but not really more aware of it till, unfortunately, after she would have passed and stuff. But it's such an it's so cool because it's such a wild story with so many twists and turns in it. It would make such a great movie if someone made a good movie of it, or a miniseries. And I know the Obamas are supposed to be making a fucking something with Netflix about it. After seeing that last movie they made with Ethan Hawke, I don't know if I'm looking forward to it anymore. That dumb one about the America ending or whatever, and the boats coming onto the land. Good visuals, but terrible movie. Yeah, it's worth digging into. And if you're in New Hampshire, they have an archive of all the Betty and Barney Hill stuff at UNH. Like, her dress is there, her writings are there, her dream journals are there, all this stuff is there. So there's a lot of good info there about it. Yeah, some podcasts about it. I think last podcast on the left has some good stuff about it. Yeah. And UFC fighter Angela Hill is Barney Hill's granddaughter. How about that? We'll end on that fucking juicy, insane piece of trivia. So there you go. And a little extended, a little bit out of the blue, going long today, feeling like shit. But we're showing up for it. We're showing out. We're not letting the shadow government decide when and where we see you guys. And show your boys some love. Pick up your copy of the Lost Forest adult coloring book. Links in bio. And get yourself some Cycling Frog gummies. Do yourself a favor. Bing bong! Because they're delicious, y'all. And I think they really helped me get through this video. Boom! All right, shrimp for breakfast coming tomorrow. Happy Betty and Barney Hill Eve, y'all. Cha-cha-cha-cha-ching. See you tomorrow, hopefully.